En novembre 2013, Community Food Centers Canada a partagé leur modèle de centre communautaire alimentaire avec Québec en Forme et ses partenaires. Dans chaque communauté, une place pour l'alimentation.
We have a big crisis when it comes to food. In this country, we have 4 million of our fellow citizens who have trouble putting food on the table, or they're missing meals so their kids can eat. There's tremendous, as you know, tremendous vulnerability in far too many of our communities across Canada. And when you look at it from a health perspective, pretty much in every province across the country, 50 cents of every dollar is spent on healthcare. And a big chunk of that money is spent on diet-related illness, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancers. So we have a big crisis there. And then if you look at it from an environmental perspective, in Toronto, the average food item that you buy in the city travels about 4,500 kilometers from field to table. And that has enormous environmental impact related to climate change. So we have some very, very big problems out there, and food is a through line connected to all of them. And so when it comes to issues of equity and access, which is where Catherine and I come out of, that's the field that we started in. The dominant response to food vulnerability in Canada, as our social infrastructure has been stripped away, has been the food bank. It's the way for 35 years we've constructed something where people will line up, get to the front of the line, and be handed not very healthy food. And so that's where I started, just to place me in this conversation, in 1998, in a very low-income neighborhood in Toronto. Culturally, very, very diverse, people from around the world. But they were unified by a lack of good jobs, social assistance rates that weren't supportive, housing that was far too expensive. And as a result, they ended up coming to this door that we had in the neighborhood. And they would have to line up at that door, and because the door wasn't open very often. And once they got in, they would be asked many, many questions. Where are you from? How much money do you have? And then when you got through that, you would arrive at the front of the, well, terrible fluorescent lights and paint falling off the wall. It was a very difficult place to be in. You would be handed a hamper of food that was never enough, that was not healthy, and that was not culturally diverse in terms of what their food needs or knowledge. So we have, this number that 1 million people use food banks in Canada, but we have this other number that 4 million people are food insecure. There are a lot of people who will just simply not go through that process because they don't want to check their humanity at the door and have to go through that and get food that isn't terribly healthy or reflective of their culture and never enough. But it didn't take a rocket scientist for us to figure out that that wasn't okay, that that wasn't sufficient. So we began a very long journey that started with a very simple thing, and that is to ask the community what they'd like. To make a very long story short, they were clear that they didn't want a handout. They didn't want to be poor. They didn't want to be treated like a number. But they wanted to cook. They wanted to grow. They wanted to volunteer. They wanted to participate in the life of their community and try to figure out how to build a better and healthier one that they felt good in. And so our story over the last 14 years and now in this new organization has been to respond to that. Create more participatory and less stigmatizing programming that allow people to come in to be cooks and gardeners and engaged citizens and volunteers all through this incredible thing called food, like the power of food to build skills and health and hope and sustainability. And another thing we never talk about in low-income communities, joy and pleasure. There's nothing more pleasurable than sitting down with others and eating together. Does that help? Just crisis? Our responses are very ephemeral and tend to be siloed, and we're trying to create organizations on the ground that are multidimensional, multifaceted, speak to access, speak to health, speak to the environment, speak to community, and you can do that through food.
61,000 meals served last year at the stop, 10,000 at the table. That's in Perth, Ontario. Gives you a sense of a different scale. At the Stop's Food Bank, 10,000 food hampers through the food bank, which was the original program and still remains there. People can get one hamper per month. 619 households served at the table. That's all in Perth. 26,000 pounds of seasonal food of the month produce purchased through the stop from local farmers. $14,000 spent on local sustainable food in Perth.
So one of the big things that we said right from the start is that the food has to be healthy. You have to draw, again, a line in the sand to say everything we do is focused on the healthiest food possible, because these are communities that desperately need the best food that's out there.
These are just some sample results that we get through our annual program survey. At the local, which is in Stratford, 75% of people in cooking and gardening groups said that they had improved their physical health. 75% at the stop last year said they were eating more fresh fruit and vegetables because it's something they learned. In the area of community connection and engagement, just a few sample numbers, 88% of people at the table in Perth said they feel like part of a community there. And that's something that we see uniformly, and perhaps one of the greatest values that we're helping to create, I think, with the community food. One thing about this place is it gives people a lot of hope when otherwise they would have none, and you can't live without hope.
So our goal is to try and create 15 community food centers across the country over the next 5 years. And we'll provide these community food centers with program development expertise, fundraising expertise, metrics and evaluation. Not only do we want to build the community food centers, these 15, but we also want to support a movement of organizations that are moving more progressively around food issues, that are moving away from charity and the handout to all of the things we've been talking about, the skills, the health, the hope, the civic engagement.
Voici les 3 thèmes des programmes qui se trouvent dans les Community Food Centers. Accessibilité aux aliments sains, compétences alimentaires et éducation et engagement. Chaque Community Food Center est différente, mais voici des exemples de programmes qui sont mis en place dans chaque thème.